I look forward to there being a tremendous amount of transparency offered as to what went into that decision and how they came to that conclusion. I think there's a lot of questions that New Yorkers have around the kind of shrouded nature of this conclusion, and I think it's incredibly important that the Department of Justice, as well as everyone involved, come forward with the facts and evidence to back up their decision.
Obviously, I mean, they left the possibility of these charges to come back post-election day. What are you going to be watching for between now and then in terms of his conduct?
Well, I think I think that prospect is very concerning given how President Trump operates, how he absolutely seems to be gutting the Department of Justice, the FBI. He's going across all federal agencies, installing political appointees. And if they are kind of wielding this prospect of charges coming back over a sitting mayor of the nation's largest city, I think that creates a very significant concern for everyday New Yorkers as to how that could potentially be leveraged in a politicized context.
Does he have a chance of winning?
You have to ask New Yorkers.
Will you plan on endorsing in the mayoral race?
I haven't really approached that yet. I've had plenty of conversations yet, but I haven't come to any conclusion.
One of our top stories this morning, President Trump's Justice Department ordering federal prosecutors to drop the sweeping corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Adams was indicted in September on charges of bribery and fraud, and we're joined now by his predecessor, former New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio. Mayor, great to have you here. So Eric Adams flew down to Mar-a-Lago. He was at Trump's inauguration, and now this. When you think back to your time in office during the first Trump administration, I mean, how do you even compare these two?
It's very different. Look, I challenged Donald Trump from the beginning. I thought what he was trying to do was a huge affront to New York City and our values. I will also say there's times when he was still the President of the United States. You had to deal with him. You had to try and find any common ground, or sometimes we needed Washington to do something for us. So I think for every mayor, every governor, striking that balance is crucial. The number one thing is defend your people, defend your city. Call them like you see them. When the president's right, great, you can work with him. When he's wrong, take him on. So in this case, I think that has to be the way forward. And we can talk about this specific case and what happened. The most important thing is, from this point on, this mayor needs to show that he will stand up for the people of New York City, regardless of what Trump did for him.
Can New Yorkers trust that he will stand up to this administration if that is what's in the best interest of this city?
You know what? There's a great phrase, don't tell me, show me. He has a chance to show people that he's doing that. In the end, look, what's happening in Washington right now, the way the Justice Department is being subverted, the way our democratic process is being undermined, everyone should not only be deeply afraid, but we need to fight it. We need to not take it lying down. That said, you can look at any individual case on its merits. You know, I actually felt literally from the beginning that the indictment of Mayor Adams was flimsy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, I read the indictment early on. I did not see much there. I think a lot of people...
So do you agree with this DOJ move?
Yeah, I actually think that charges were not strong enough. They were affecting the democratic process in New York City. We have a Democratic primary for mayor in just over 4 months. This needed to be resolved one way or another. So I am actually comfortable that these were weak charges. I don't think they even should have been brought. But I'm not comfortable, of course, with what's happening in Washington with the Justice Department. I'm not comfortable with what Donald Trump is doing to our institutions and how he's undermining our democracy. And I think for Eric Adams now, the challenge is, okay, now you have a chance to focus on being mayor. You have a chance to talk to the people in New York City about what we need to do, including how we need to deal with the Trump administration, and show us that you're striking that balance.
Well, look, the reasoning behind ordering the charges to be dropped actually doesn't even say that the evidence wasn't strong enough. I mean, Emil Bovee, who's the acting number 2 at the Justice Department, lays out in this memo that DOJ officials did not evaluate the evidence of the case. Instead, he argues that the indictment came too close to this year's mayoral primary in June, and that it was hindering Mayor Adams' ability to crack down on immigrants and to fight crime. What do you make of that justification?
I think there's a profound flaw in that. I think they actually should have just said, these charges are not strong enough.
Why wouldn't they?
Right, no, I think they should. But at the same time, I can say from the experience of understanding what it does to a leader trying to run a place as difficult as New York City, if there's anything else hanging out there, it does undermine the ability to do the job day to day. Also, Department of Justice historically has said when it's close to an election, these matters need to be resolved one way or another so as not to be basically the DOJ stepping into a local election and determining the outcome in effect. I think it would have been better if they said, hey, we looked at the case, we don't find much here. Or if they did find a lot, okay, then go forward. I don't love the way they worded it.
Bottom line, what's the message then? What message does the chain of events? Again, you know, charges brought, Mayor Adams cozies up to Trump, then Trump Justice Department says drop the charges. What message does this send to other local and state officials across the country?
Look, I start with no one's above the law, and if someone's done something wrong, they should pay the consequences. So one of the things that's clear about Donald Trump, he does not believe that, right? He's fundamentally trying to take away the key lesson we learned from Watergate. No one's above the law.
Tell us more about this order, Ken.
Well, Chris, as you mentioned, they said it wasn't about the facts and the law, but they did say it was about what they believed was the weaponization of the Justice Department in bringing this case. And, you know, Eric Adams has been complaining that he got crosswise with the Biden administration over immigration, and that's why they charged him. There's no evidence of that. But that sentiment was reflected in this memo. I want to read it to you. It says, it cannot be ignored that Mayor Adams criticized the prior administration's immigration policies before the charges were filed, and the former U.S. attorney's public actions created appearances of impropriety. That's a reference to the Biden-appointed U.S. attorney Damian Williams. DOJ officials believe he used the case to burnish his image. That's debatable. But what's alarming Justice Department officials here is the idea that the political leadership of the DOJ is ordering line prosecutors to drop a high-profile political corruption case for which they unveiled a massive amount of evidence in a speaking indictment. For his part, Eric Adams is continuing to proclaim his innocence, and he's sort of acting as if this is all over. Let's take a listen to Eric Adams.
As I said from the outset, I never broke the law, and I never would. I thank the Justice Department for its honesty. Now, we can put this cruel episode behind us and focus entirely on the future of our city. It's time to move forward.
So a couple of things about that. Number one, the case hasn't been dismissed yet. This is an order to the Southern District of New York. As far as we know, nobody in that office has carried out that order, and it's going to be an interesting question to see whether anyone resigns rather than do that. The second thing, though, is that these charges are being dismissed without prejudice, according to the memo, or will be if that's what happens, meaning that they can be refiled at any time. So the idea that he's completely out of the woods is an open question. And another open question is how much leverage does that give Donald Trump and the Trump administration over the mayor of New York when they are trying to, for example, more strictly enforce immigration laws in what has been a sanctuary city, Chris?
Well, not a bad question, Congressman, right? I mean, what does it mean? We can reinstate these charges against you at any minute.
It's a hostage situation. Look, I think there's a lot going on. I think people are right to feel that it feels a little dirty. It feels a little transactional. It also was very obvious in its politics. Even the memo from DOJ said Eric Adams needs to focus on illegal immigration and fighting violent crime, with kind of a nod to the Biden administration letting it go unchecked. But then there is this question about what type of leverage, because it was dismissed without prejudice, which means the charges could come back. And listen, this is also Donald Trump, who faces, though largely at the state level, faces a lot of his own liability and vulnerability in the city and in the state of New York. He, I believe, his license to practice or be engaged in nonprofits has been revoked. We know the charges that have happened at the state level. He has created an ally. And I think what this also says is not only is the Trump administration's DOJ now transactional, but what are the opportunities for other elected officials facing peril? I mean, SDNY is somebody that's prosecuted a lot of cases recently, political cases, including Republicans and Democrats. What does that mean in terms of the currency that Donald Trump now wields over them?
Harry, I think one of the extraordinary parts of this is that they didn't even try to argue the facts, the law here. What do you see when you read this order?
Extraordinary isn't the word. Singular and unique is the word. The idea that they would be doing this without any attention to the facts and the law is absolute anathema to the Department of Justice. The currency of all cases are facts and law. The idea of not judging weaponization based on facts and law is, again, anathema to the Department of Justice. An alien force has invaded the Department of Justice and is imposing rank political and, as David says, transactional considerations, and that completely corrupt and politicize the DOJ's function. This is really beyond any possible.
Real deal New Yorkers like AOC and de Blasio, they are not happy here. Because what Trump is doing is not only an affront to justice, but it's also a new avenue of corruption that maybe we didn't even fully consider, because you see all of these right-wing Democratic politicians. No, it's not the progressives. You have people like Eric Adams, who is effectively a Republican, right? He knows he's in a deep blue state, in a deep blue city, so the only way you can get elected as a Republican is to pretend you're a Democrat and hopefully trick enough voters, which he unfortunately did. And so now that he's in big trouble, he's bending the knee to Trump and kissing Trump's behind and, licking Trump's boots, all of his boots, even the ones in the closet, the shoes too. And it looks like it's going to pay off for him. So it's not only injustice in the sense that if anybody else was charged with the crimes Eric Adams was charged with, I'm not saying he would have been found guilty. That's for the jury to decide. But it would at least have gotten that far. No one would have gotten this preemptive. It's not a pardon, but it sort of is, right? Because Trump is effectively dropping the charges through like fiat as President King. But also, it's a new avenue of corruption, because you think about it, any politician that finds themselves in trouble now knows that if they bend the knee to Trump, if they publicly support him, and not in this case necessarily, but maybe they make a donation to Trump, right? Then hypothetically, the charges could go away. I'm not saying Eric Adams has donated to Trump. I don't know if he has or hasn't. But he certainly has sort of been talking positively about Trump against the wishes of most New Yorkers to get himself off the hook. Listen to the real New York ladies and men. They don't like this.